I'm Simon Mann. I'm a qualified advocate in 2 jurisdictions, the Isle of Man and as an English solicitor. And the constituency I'm standing in is in Ramsey.
So if you can just tell us, first of all, then, why it is you're seeking election for the House of Keys.
Well, primarily on 2 main local issues. The first, of course, which has troubled Ramsey now for some length of time, is the marina proposal. Now, I've been firmly behind that, against that, effectively, since 2019. And it really is a proposal that's going nowhere. In reality, that beach belongs to the public and their rights of way across it. And for anybody to develop that beach, you're going to have to, or the developers are going to have a freehold. You cannot really create a viable apartment for somebody to buy when you're taking a leasehold interest out of a leasehold. I can't see anybody ever granting a mortgage in that situation. There will be some similar sort of situations in the UK possibly, but it's not ideal. And so that means that the state, people of Ramsey, have to actually lose the beach, the future ownership of that property, to the developers. Now, since this proposal has been put into the public domain, you've got to put yourself in the place of people who live in the area. This is the equivalent now to those people of planning blight. And the reality of the situation is that property values will have dropped. If you consider trying to sell your house, and suddenly this proposal has been hanging over the area for some length of time, you're not going to be able to do that without having considerable loss in the value. And you've got to consider how many people live along the promenade in Ramsey. Many of them are settled, they're retired, they have their view of the sea, they have the use of the beach, and let's face it, it's not just the people of Ramsey who have the use of the beach. The visitors to Ramsey use that beach. It is one of the most beautiful parts of the island. And suddenly, and without proper process really now, this blight has been hanging over the town. And one of my main objectives in this election is to deliver finality to that situation on election night. I'm calling for enough people to back me to say no to the current marina proposal. Now, that's not no to development in Ramsey, full stop. Ramsey needs investment. But no to this ridiculous and senseless marina proposal. You know, if the legitimate planning process had been adopted right at the start, it would have come to an end by now, and there would be finality for people, but it hasn't. So there's a lot of people suffering in Ramsey at the moment, needlessly, and that has to come to an end. Now, the second issue comes down to the fact that we have a shortfall in GPs. We've got one fairly reasonable but dated GP surgery that's serving the entire north of the island. Now, you'll be familiar with the fact that I went to Tynwald to present a petition on that subject. And it's a matter that's close to my heart, because when you ring up a doctor's surgery, and for whatever reason, you know, they are trying their best, and I acknowledge that, but for whatever reason you can't get an appointment, and sometimes can't get an appointment for a considerable period of time. Or in my case, as in the subject matter of the petition, I couldn't even get a phone call in a reasonable period of time. Something and somebody has to do something about it. Now, what I want to see is a modern medical centre for Ramsey. I want to see the redevelopment of Ramsey Cottage Hospital. And as you will be aware, I presented that petition in front of Her Royal Highness Princess Anne. And I would like to name the new medical centre after her, and I'd like to invite her back to the island to open it. Now, many people would say, well, how are you going to deliver on this, and where's the money going to come from? Well, my view is that firstly, and I've had meetings with Manx Care already, Mr. Foster and Mrs. Cope are both good people, and I've also been to their recent board meeting, and I'm a familiar sight to the board members there. Manx Care hasn't been given sufficient money to do anything. Their current mandate is to save money, and I don't think the public are aware of the fact that the assets, the hospitals and the buildings and so on, haven't been handed to Manx Care. They've got no control over them. And so there's not a single thing that Manx Care can do at the moment to rectify the situation as far as the medical service in the north of the island is concerned. And so I'm coming out very firmly and asking people in Ramsey that when they vote for me, they say yes to a new medical centre. Now, it's going to need the voice of Ramsey to say that this has to change, in a similar way to the marina proposal. If enough people say no to this sort of thing, well, on election night, the town delivers its message. And I'm going to represent Ramsey. I'm intent upon representing Ramsey. And when the town says no to something, our no's mean no. And when we say yes to something, our yeses are going to mean yes.
Now, on the marina, you mentioned that you're not necessarily against development per se. Would you welcome this type of project just in a different style, in a different location, perhaps?
Not necessarily the style, because if you look at what is proposed, it's rather like saying, well, let's have a car park. Let's clear the Murrock Park, for instance, another beautiful part of Ramsey. Let's clear that and turn it into a car park for Rolls Royces and Ferraris and a parking place for the rich and wealthy. I'm not convinced that that style of marina is actually needed for Ramsey. Ramsey has historically been a seafaring town, and there's always been a nice balance between the commercial fishing vessels and the pleasure craft, provided that one section hasn't dominated the other. And my feeling is that there's plenty of scope within the existing tidal harbour to create a really nice area up in the old harbour for pleasure craft, and without the associated massive expenses, if you like, that government are now facing with Peel Marina. It's all very well to say these marinas are a good idea. In some instances they are, and in some locations they are. Ramsey's the wrong location for this type of marina, but the right place for a limited and really nice top quality facility for the local pleasure craft. Now, as to the super rich and those who need a deep sea berth out in beyond the harbour mouth, effectively, well, there are other locations for that type of development better suited around the island. I'm not against having a marina around the island, just not that particular proposal in Ramsey.
Now, we asked you to fill in Manx Radio's Are You Standing form, and you told us a little bit about some of your other policies. I wanted to pick up on, in particular, combing reform. That's something you highlighted as a need. Why is that? Well,
if you look at how this ministerial system has worked over recent years, it's got to the stage, and I think if we look at how the matter's been handled with COVID-19, it's got to the stage where the Council of Ministers has been effectively the government. And it doesn't seem to have mattered how much shouting from the backbenches and so on there's been. there hasn't been sufficient transparency. I actually asked for minutes and so on of some of the business, and within the legislation, when the Council of Ministers was set up, they actually built in their own position where they are, to a certain extent, not accountable to anybody. Now, they will say that there's the advantage to that is that they have freedom within their meetings to be able to discuss sensitive matters and so on, and that there's no comeback effectively if they really want to discuss those things in detail. I can see some purpose on certain sensitive issues in that. But if we look at COVID, there's no doubt about it that as a result of that situation, some of the expertise was not accessed properly. Some of the decisions were certainly made perhaps in the heat of the moment, perhaps apparently in the best interests. But it escaped the scrutiny of our government. And something has to change with this situation. I'm afraid there's a very, very strong influence by the senior civil service over how our island is run. And the message I would send out to the civil services in this next administration, take notice of the fact that the elected representatives of the people are going to be running this island. And we've got to have a shift from the civil service mindset. You can't get answers on the telephones. You have a situation where really accountability doesn't seem to be something that instantly comes to mind. And I'm not even satisfied that when you go to the Comin and when you go to the Cabinet Office with freedom of information requests, that actually they're that happy in providing the information, and you don't necessarily get it with clarity, and you tend to meet a wall of silence. Now, to me, the entire system has to be reformed, and I would suggest that, yes, by all means have a Council of Ministers, but as they make their decisions, they should need to refer directly back to Tynwald to have those decisions ratified. And if there are questions, the questions need to be substantively answered.
What's your assessment of government over the last 5 years?
Well, if you look all around you, government's performance over the last 5 years has been abysmal. And actually, give or take a few members, I cannot actually see a good reason why across the island many of the previous MHKs should even be considered to be re-elected again. The situation outside, you've only got to look at Douglas Promenade, you've only got to look at the mess of the situation over the landing stage at Liverpool. Basic, simple, contractual issues have been missed. We rely on a government to get it right. And when I look around the island at the moment, the place is just in an appalling state. And somebody somewhere now has to stand up, and I'm prepared to do that. If I'm elected, and I get into that House of Keys, the word scrutiny is going to be coming out every day of the week, and my message is that this island can and will do better in the future. It needs to do better. We need to return the pride to the island. And it's a pride that's gone missing over the last 5 years.
What would you have done differently if you were in Keys in the last 5 years? What would you have done differently to what has unfolded?
Well, let's just take, for instance, the two major projects. How you can possibly have Douglas Promenade that's gone on from one stage to the other on both time and money. It's run out of control. Now, yes, the COVID intervened, but COVID was an excuse, a reasonable excuse for some element of delay. We accept that. Cost I don't accept. and the way the structure of the contract was both put into place and subsequently performed, I don't accept. If you're negotiating for a major civil engineering project, the first thing to do is you want to be sure that the people that are going to be doing the job are going to be able to deliver, and you put enough clauses into the contract to make it watertight. Now, I've not seen their contract, and building contracts and civil engineering contracts do have quite a number of allowances here and there for certain events. But it looks to me as if the entire contract should have been looked at better. I would personally have divided it down into small sections, and when one section had been completed to a reasonable satisfaction and in a proper timescale, on budget and on time, then they'd have got to sign up to the next portion. We're going to deal with the whole promenade all in one go attitude. Well, it was a mistake. Now, Liverpool landing stage, if you were going to be looking at a contract for that type of project off the island in Liverpool, you needed to pull in the expertise. And I would say, certainly in the UK, construction industry expertise. And to me, they've been out of their depth, literally.
We've talked a little bit about your priorities for your constituency. What about on a national scale? What are the island's priorities for the next 5 years?
Well, I would say at the moment the biggest single priority is knowing where we stand financially. I'm not satisfied for one moment that the apparent reserves that this government has are actually real reserves. That is, we can see them as a figure on a piece of paper. But when one calculates the liabilities that there are around this island, I would say that actually the coffers are probably truly pretty nearly empty. And when we examine, what our liabilities are, the allowance at the moment for health, for instance, is not taking into account the massive amount of improvements that need to be done. Noble's Hospital is 20 years old. You've only got to look at the roof of it. You've only got to look at the structures. You've only got to look at what's inside it. An awful lot of money is going to have to be spent on what was a brand new building but is now 20 years old. If you project that across the whole island, look at the roads. You could actually use a vast amount of current reserves simply putting the roads in order. So are they real reserves, or are they actually just the money that should have been spent on keeping this island in good order, and that money just hasn't been spent where it should have been spent, and we're all suffering as a result?
So just finally, because we're coming up to our 20 minutes, a vote for you. If you were speaking directly to your constituents now, what does a vote for you mean?
A vote for me means we have to deliver on election night. Finality as far as the marina proposal is concerned. Ramsey has to produce to me, please, a sufficiently strong mandate to say no to those developers on election night. And if we're going to do nothing else as far as the health of this island is concerned, and it goes beyond Ramsey, but I want, please, the people of Ramsey to stand up and say, yes, we need a new medical centre. And we have to stop this position where patients ring up in the morning and they're not getting the treatment, or they're not getting the timely service that they want. That's not a criticism of the existing medical service there. It is just saying that Ramsey needs something better.